Hello viewer, I'm Dr. Bolajoko, a research associate with I Care Consortium. Today we're going to be discussing clinician researcher on clinical trial, diversity and trust. We have Dr. Willis in the studio today to help us understand the landscape. You're welcome, Dr. Willis.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. I'm Floyd Willis. I'm a family physician and the medical director for the Eye Care Project. Really have spent most of my career seeing patients, but for a number of reasons got really interested in community outreach and research. So I'm very happy to be here.
It's really good to know that. So before we go forward, we'd like to ask you to share with us one fun fact about you.
One fun fact. I don't know how fun it is, but it's an interesting fact anyway. So I grew up in a little town, Forsyth, Georgia, and my parents were both about 46, just shy of 46 years of age when I was born. So my mother always said she went to the doctor and they told her she had a tumor because her uterus and tummy was bigger, and they were very concerned about that. And she said, I think I'm pregnant because tumors don't kick.
That's really cool.
But it was really interesting. So I had a very happy childhood in that little town, but it was really interesting that my parents were friends with all of my other friends' grandparents. Because by the time I got 10 years of age, they were 55. But I think it, even back then, gave me a soft spot for older people. I kind of watched them. They were pretty healthy.
Yeah,
But
can
it
imagine
made
that.
you pay attention when it's your parents, maybe a little bit more than when
Yeah.
it's your grandparents. But anyway, my mother probably could have named me Tumor and gotten away with it. But I'm glad she didn't. Name me Floyd. So anyway, and that's a whole nother
That's
story.
really
But,
cool.
well, I'm glad to be here.
That's really
Share
cool.
that fun fact.
Yes.
Mhm.
So today we're going to be, you're going to be helping us understand the landscape, the current landscape of clinical trial.
Mhm.
But I'm going to start with a few questions and want you to explain to us why diversity is important
Mhm.
in scientific research.
Just to clarify for everybody, I did not start my medical career as someone with an interest in community outreach, engagement, and research. I really was seeing patients and very, very happy to see patients. That's my passion. But I was approached by a couple of researchers who were having trouble getting enough diversity in their clinical trials, having a lot of difficulty doing it. And it was interesting that the clinical trials were on memory and memory loss. You know, most important work on memory and memory loss is to decide whose memory is not normal and whose memory is normal.
Normal.
In order to do that, there are a lot of tests, paper and pencil tests where they ask you questions and that kind of thing. And it's just really important to have people from all walks of life in those tests, because how can you figure out what's normal and what's not if all the testing is done on one group?
On one group, I can imagine.
So, but again, I'm a family physician and I was minding my own business, doing my work. But they said, this is a really difficult thing to do and we've tried. And I said, well, you know, this is important. We can't have this kind of disease process happening all around us, but we not really understand how to even diagnose it in black people. For that matter, Hispanic people or people that grew up in certain areas where their customs and their language might be a little bit different. How do you compare them to this other group who has a completely different culture, custom, language? And long story short, they asked my opinion on how we would get that, or if I had any opinion. And I said, I really do. I think advertising in the newspapers or just putting something on the radio, I don't know that it will be as effective. And they had tried that. But it had to be deeper than that. And I think the connection with the community had to be deeper than that. And something you and I have talked about before, there has to be trust.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult thing to measure, you know. You can't put your finger in the air and say, yeah, they trust me. It's discussion and going into the community
Yeah.
and doing outreach. And although I was, and I still am, really happy seeing my patients, that is my passion. What I think I realized more and more was that this kind of clinical research would probably lead to better ways to diagnose people,
Yeah.
better ways to take care of people. In a lot of ways, it helps people to understand what they should be screened for, when they should go to the doctor, how to recognize these things, because that outreach piece a lot of times gives a lot of useful information to people that otherwise might not know about it. And so I concluded that I really enjoyed seeing patients in the office one-on-one, but that you could do a lot of good if you got out of the office, because, you know, talking to one person in my office is great, but sometimes a different kind of impact can be made if you're talking to 100 people,
100
or
people.
you're doing something like what we're doing right now that
Yeah.
might get to 1,000 people,
Yeah.
and they will say, wow, so really this research makes a difference. I should participate, because in the end I may help me and my children and my children's children when they're
Yeah.
discovering new drugs and new treatments.
So, thank you so much. That's really amazing. In your opinion, if research is just targeted at a certain population, what do you think would happen if it's just the type of people or type of people that speak certain language that the research is just targeted at them? What do you think would happen if research is not, I mean, if diverse participants are not involved?
Yeah, I think that we miss an opportunity to be sure that the research that leads to treatments and therapies might not be as accurate.
Yeah.
If you only do the research and learn how to treat certain diseases and certain illnesses on one group of people, it's very difficult to say, well, it'll work in all those other people. It's I think, impossible to do that. I mean, from a scientific perspective, I don't think you could. An example is, if you did all the research on men, it doesn't take a scientist to say, well, now, whatever I learned on all those men, I'm just going to use on women. It'll probably be okay.
Oh no.
Right.
No.
So the group has to include people from everyone, I think, everywhere, I think.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
This is really very cool. So, as a clinician and researcher, how do you approach people about clinical trial? I mean, discussing this opportunity to participate in clinical trial with them.
Two things. Two things about that. The first is I enjoy approaching people about that, but I've had the great privilege a lot of the time of approaching people that I've already established trust with. So a lot of times, yeah, I've practiced for 34 years, no longer than that if you count before where I currently work. And it's a different conversation when you've taken care of somebody for 5 or 10 years and you say, hey, this project is coming up. I think it will be really good for you and for the community. And a lot of times I think they will trust the fact that I'm not going to send them to something that's
Yeah.
going to be dangerous. Beyond that, I say some of the things that we just mentioned, that if I'm familiar with research or a clinical trial, and sometimes people will reach out to people in my department and say, hey, can you help us? We need groups of people to participate. They don't have a good group of folks that typically don't participate in research. They're a little afraid to participate. I would say, some very bad things happen in years past to people from different cultures when they were invited into research. Does not happen anymore, to my knowledge, or if it happens, it's extremely rare. And I just, so don't be fearful of it. There's way more upside. There's way more to be gained by having a diverse group of people in this project. And what we don't want is for all these fantastic discoveries to be made 5 and 10 and 15 years from now. And they say, well, we don't have enough diversity. because the diverse populations just didn't want to participate. Most of the time, people get that. They still have questions, but I think if you present it to them the right way, they understand it's in the best interest. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much. That's really eye-opening that we just need to approach them and explain to them the right way. So you have heard you mention trust and or you also mentioned the importance of talking to people, explaining clinical trial to people. Could you share with us an example of any clinical trial you've been involved in where trust was necessary?
Sure. I think the biggest example was the memory loss project that I talked about, where we really had to recruit hundreds of people. Wasn't particularly going well, but we did two things. We started recruiting through the church, which is one of the most trusted, maybe the most trusted institution in the black community anyway, from which people get this information. They've done that for years. So to funnel that information to the church is just one example. That is what we did. And the other thing is we hired someone who was a church member. They worked in the church. They did not have a biomedical background, but it was very clear that they got along with a lot of people in the church, and the church members trusted this person. And they came to our institution and they were trained to do the work that they were supposed to do in the biomedical sciences. And it worked very, very well. And those are two examples in the same project. Yeah.
That is so exciting.
Yeah.
So exciting that we could have a team member who was not designated an investigator. You know, it's amazing. How did you convince him or her to join the research?
To do it, well, that's another thing. And it still goes back to trust. A number of the projects that I was approached about, which were compelling enough that said, I'm going to leave my office and I'm going to try to work on these things. They were in communities where I was already volunteering.
Okay.
This was not the first time people had seen me. I was already connected with the church and a couple of volunteer organizations, and I had no idea I was going to be involved in any community outreach or research project. So this young lady, I think, we talked, we had met, we had volunteered on projects together, and I think, just like the participants, she I think grew to trust the work that was being done in a way that was different if there hadn't been someone already connected with the institution. So it's an important thing. I think it's a very useful thing. I know all physicians are really, really busy, and I think particularly family physicians, because we spread ourselves pretty thin trying to take care of what's going on in the office. And I think it's probably our nature to be in the community doing other things. It's just I see a lot of our residents and others, they hold that very, very important. And I think that getting out and connecting with the community is very useful to do that way before you talk about a research project. Or go find a biomedical professional, physician, if you can find them, that's already well connected with the community and say, hey, do you think this would be an interesting project for the community to involve with? Would you help? Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's a very good answer. So we work with people that are already in those communities that the community trusts.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, as an investigator and a physician, so that's had opportunity to work with studies. So how do you ensure that the participant population reflects the population that the research wants to address?
That's probably not as complicated as it sounds. I think if you're working on solving a medical problem and you know it affects people from all cultures, all skin tones, all races, pretty much got to have people in your project that reflect all skin tones, all cultures, all races. But if you're doing a project and it only affects African American, sickle cell or something like that, people of African descent, or some other projects that I could, some other illnesses that I could think of that only affect one particular
Certain population.
population, you have to be sure that whatever you're studying, you have participants who are affected by that disease process.
Yeah.
And usually that's not just me. The projects are usually very well put together and groomed by a team of researchers. Those decisions are made as a team. As you know, you're an accomplished scientist yourself. But I think that does drive home the point to people who might want to participate in project, that if someone comes to you and says, will you participate in this project, that means this is likely affecting people like you. They wouldn't be asking you otherwise. It most likely affects people like you. So some really good reason to say yes. Let me participate because I might help myself. I might help future generations of people like me.
So thank you so much, Dr. Willis. It's really important to know that if you're approached for a research, it's probably because it affects people like you. I'm taking that home with me. So now, what would you, or how would you encourage other physicians that are willing to become investigators or to work with investigators, especially in working with community, to recruit participants from the community? What would be your word to them?
Two things, and I don't want to forget the second one because it's really important. It's a project called Project Impact. She'll remind me if I forget it. But I think number one, in my own mind right this moment, there are a number of answers to this question, but probably number one is some facts that I heard 2 weeks ago. I was at a conference and multiple people stood up and talked about how long it takes to double the medical knowledge that we have. Whatever we have right now, everything we know, how long does it take to increase that by double? Well, years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it took years to double that knowledge. These two presenters nowadays, in 3 or 4 or 5 months, almost everything we know about medicine is twice as big, which means there's a lot of medical research going on. Pills and treatments, genetics, and epigenetics. It's just a tremendous amount of stuff going on. And people from communities that usually aren't involved in that, they gotta be involved. We cannot let all of this body of work keep growing and people of different cultures, different races, are not involved in that. I just don't know whether it can be done without a large group of physicians participating. I know we're all busy with our patients, but I would encourage anyone that's seeing patients, particularly if they're seeing patients in communities that are most heavily burdened, that just really have a lot of medical issues. It's all the more important to have those communities represented in all of this work. So I would really, really strongly encourage people to just make, even if it's just a small part of their practice, to try to encourage this biomedical research and encourage the patients from the communities that they work to do that. So how do you do that? A number of different ways. This eye care program goes about trying to educate physicians to participate in the trials that we talk about. The National Medical Association has a project called Impact. It can be Googled, where they will teach any and all physicians who are interested in clinical trials. How do you do it? At what level can my office participate? And I would say fairly easy if you're a practicing physician. If you're at a big institution, it's very easy. You just call up your research chair and they will go, oh my goodness, yeah, you can help. And if you're in a small office all by yourself, you can still Google clinical trials, how do I participate as a physician. I think a lot of opportunity will be rolled out there. So it's not a difficult thing. It just takes sitting down, talking about it. And I think probably not a bad idea for patients to ask their doctors and encourage them, hey, is there any research I can participate in? You know, Dr. Jones or Dr. Smith, because it might encourage them to say, you know what, yes, 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 there is, and I'll help you get there.
It helps to understand that you could still participate even if you're not in a big hospital. You could just look up the internet, Google, how do I participate? How does my office participate in clinical trials?
Yeah, yeah.
So now that we have discussed the physician who would want to participate, so what advice would you give to patients and families who are curious but kind of still hesitant about clinical trials?
Right. Yeah, well, it goes back to my roots, as I said when we started this show. I'm a family physician. My passion is to take care of people, from no matter their age. One important part of what I do is creating that trust with with patients. So my advice, if you're really interested in a clinical trial, of course you can go on the internet, you can make a phone call. But one thing to do is just talk with your provider.
Okay.
If you think about it, if you have some issue and you say, I wonder what research is being done on this, I think you probably trust your provider probably more than anybody else in biomedical sciences. And that's not an unreasonable thing at all. To tell your doc, hey, I really do want to involve myself in clinical trials. How do I do that? The doctor's probably going to help you do it, and if not, they're probably going to pat the patient on the back and say, that's a great thing to do. We'll look into it. And then the second thing is the American Cancer Society, the kidney societies, the asthma societies, the Alzheimer's Association, almost all of those places, if you look on their websites, they will have ways that you can connect with people who are doing research, or to leave information to suggest that you're interested in biomedical research. And probably those would be my top two suggestions. Starting with your provider. Hey,
Yeah.
what can I do to participate? And I think they will really guide you down the road.
Yeah, thank you. But if they are hesitant, I mean, they'd love to participate, but they are still kind of hesitant. How can they be helped?
I think if they're hesitant, I mean, one thing that probably helps to inspire me, and I think it will probably inspire anybody from cultures that perhaps have not had as much access to healthcare as we would have wanted. We do have the opportunity to get to clinical trials in a safe way.
Okay.
And I think it honors the people that came before us, that fought the battle to allow us to even be able to walk into some of the hospitals. It honors them, to me, to say, I'm going to participate, now that we can come here, I'm going to participate in the next wave of doing great things so that medicine can help me and my community. So that would be probably my last encouraging words. Just see that as a little bit of part of you giving back.
Yeah, thank you. That's really a big one, giving back to your community. Thank you, Dr. Willis, for
It has
helping
been a
us
pleasure to be here.
understand clinical trials today.